Hello, everyone. Greetings from the UN Office of Women's Federation for World Peace International here in New York. I am back in New York, and today is Friday, May 19th. Today, I welcome you all to our new program. It's going to be every month. We call it Roundtable Talk at the United Nations. This is a wonderful initiative of our UN representatives here in New York. This is born through the inspiration and creative ideas of our UN representatives for 2023 cohort. And so here with me is Rachel Beth Tamayo, our UN representative for the Department of Global Communications. And we have our temporary UN representative, Christine Rose Bolayo, and yours truly, Merle Barlan. And with us online, joining us by Zoom, is our UN representative, Sophia Jimenez. Hello, Sophia. And we also have Shruti Lekha. She is our UN representative in Geneva, and currently she's joining us from India. And so, yeah, here today, and basically the purpose of this program is very simple. It's not a formal conference or something, but UN representatives of Women's Federation debriefing, talking, reflecting, and having a conversation around what are the issues that are being discussed at the UN, the programs and events that we have attended. And we want to make it understandable for the civil society and especially for our constituents, because based on my experience in the past, many years ago, the UN talk, those discussions are really difficult to understand. And if we don't understand it clearly, how can we implement it well, right? So what we want to do is have a conversation around it and ask questions and share our reflections and the lessons learned. And then, we want it to be interactive. So whoever is watching us right now, you can ask questions. And we have, right now, today, our expert would be Shruti, Shruti Lekha. So for today's topic, we will be talking about the right to development. This is what we have attended, right? Last month in April, the 7th session of the expert mechanism on the right to development was discussed at the UN. And one of the experts is Shruti Lekha. She flew from Geneva to New York just to be with the other experts and talk about the right to development. So yeah, I'm gonna give the floor to Shruti to shed a light more on what is the right to development. Shruti, take it away.
Hi, thank you so much, Merle. This is an amazing initiative, and I must say that I'm sure we're all going to benefit from it, learn from each other. I think this is great. So thank you so much for bringing up this and making this happen. And thank you so much for the lovely introduction too. I think I should say that it has been a very intensive learning process for me, myself as well, with the right to development, because it is one of the most crucial concepts when it comes to human rights and development, yet not so much of the knowledge is very widespread amongst the common population. So we're not so much aware of the right to development because of its own history, because of its own political debate, which is basically not necessary. The right to development is an inalienable human right, which cannot be denied by anything or by any reason or for any cause. It should be protected all the time. So what basically the right to development entitles is that it mentions that everybody, every individual, every community, and every society, and every nation has an equal and meaningful right to participate and contribute to development as a process. So the right to development does not put development as like an GDP pedestal, like, an economic point growth or something, which eventually leaves someone or the other behind. When you are in a competitive market, or when you are under political setups which does not involve equal and inclusive decision making, you leave people behind. You don't have inclusive mechanisms for the development of your society. So the right to development is the human right, which gives everybody the right to take and give in the decision-making process of the development of any society. So if I am a citizen of India, or if I'm living in Germany, or wherever I am, I have the right to contribute to the decision-making process of any development agenda. At the same time, the benefits which come out of this development, for example, economic growth or political development or anything, I get my fair part out of it. So whatever contribution I've given, I need to get my fair benefits out of it, fair share of benefits. This basically brings solutions to problems like richer people getting richer and poorer people getting poorer. We get to find a solution of how inclusive this process must be, and this is what the right to development says. This is to say it in simple words, but right to development obviously has a lot of complex understandings in policies, in practice, in debates and negotiations, which is more like an onion. Like when you peel it, it keeps going. That's how it is. So I think it's a very interesting, but also very crucial point to discuss. And it was wonderful to have a workshop that we did in New York for the expert mechanism in New York in person with wonderful participants, where we discussed a lot about the right to development and how it is practically seen in local communities. So we were even discussing topics like how caste system, for example, in India is a violation to the right to development, or how migration policies or food policies are in some places violating the right to development, how not so inclusive they are. So it was really, really, really fruitful to have such debates. And I'm sure like all the participants benefited out of the workshop that we hosted very much as well. And it was a pleasure that we also had the chance to take part in the expert mechanism, make very meaningful contributions to the expert mechanisms. We had all our UN representatives there. So it was wonderful. So when me as an expert who've been trying to become an expert, I have to say, I mean, this is a never-ending learning process. So who's trying to keep learning and who's been working with this working group and the expert mechanism for nearly 2.5 years now. And I'm also doing my research and my doctorate and in the same. But one thing which always keeps me very open to yours, like I really want to listen, I've always wanted to discuss with everybody about it, is how do you or anybody or like any individual who has expertises in different background, for example, I know here our fellow UN representative Sophie has an expertise in like food systems, and I've always wondered how does she sees it. Like how does Merle, with so much expertise in project management and community building, see right to development, and how do you see it benefits the developing countries, or how do you see that it makes an impact? Because I think this is something which we should start with. Like, how does it intersectionally make an impact? How does right to development, what does it mean to you? So I thought maybe we could start this discussion with this question, maybe, that how does right to development, how do you think, how important is it, especially for developing countries, and how much it can benefit to the area of factors that you think you specialize at? So maybe, I don't know. Merle, would you like to start? And maybe Sophia?
Thank you, Shruti. That is a very important explanation. Well, we can't hear you, but you're not muted, but we can't hear you.
I think it's late, so
Oh, okay.
she's there. Sorry.
Okay, so I think, thank you, Shruti. I'd like to ask Sophia, because during the UN event, Sophia had a chance to ask our experts. And so, how was the experience for you, Sophia? And with regards to Shruti's question, I would appreciate if you can answer that.
Sure, with pleasure. Well, I'll start by responding to Shruti's first question of how in our field of expertise, or in our field of practice, we understand the right to development and how we can benefit from it. So, for instance, my area of practice is migration and food systems, and labor standards in agriculture, like labor standards in the production of food, in particular agriculture. And that's why I interact a lot with migration and human rights. And so when it comes to the right to development, it's basically a tool, it's an opportunity to finally achieve this goal of equality, this goal of justice, this goal of human rights. It's like the centerpiece, or it's like the core of the other rights. So whenever it was until I joined Women's Federation, and until I had very deep conversations with Shruti, that I understood how, like, the importance of the right to development and how entangled it was with other rights. Like, we hear the word development, and we think of economic development, or we think of the transition from developing to developed. And basically we think we have like many thoughts around the word, but the reality is that it's an umbrella that covers the rest of all the other rights that are essential to achieve this goal of equality, of justice, of human rights, like all the right to, like, the right to be part of the decision making, and the right to be part of the process, the right to be the right to be an active participant of the changing environment, of the changing economics, of the changing and developing road. So that's well, that was a long answer to respond the question of what is the right to development for my area, or how do I see the right to development in my area of practice. That was one. And then circling back to your question of how was for me the experience of being at the UN's discussion of the right to development, and having like the opportunity to interact with the experts about about the right to development. Something that came across during those discussions were migration and how the right to development, unfortunately, is not being exercised, or it's not being practiced, or it's not being what would be the word? It's not being yes, like actively exercised or
Protected.
projected. Exactly, it's not being projected in migration, and now it was like something that different organizations agree on, that like we have a problem. I mean, it's not a problem, we have a phenomenon of migration, and we are not seeing the right to development to be part of that phenomena. We're not, we're in a moment where a lot of human rights are being
Oh, I think we lost her.
Oh, we do. Oh, okay. Well, yeah.
I think
We
Sophia is entering the room.
Oh, is she back? All right. Pia, are you back?
sorry for that. It was something
No.
happened with my internet. So what I was saying is that we're living a moment where the right to development is not being it's not being included or look after. It's in the process of migration, or in the rights of migration. So a lot of human rights are being violated, and that's what. And one of the reasons is because like we are not having a shared understanding, or a common understanding, or a complete understanding of what the right to development is. And we have to. That's why this process of knowledge building, it's so important, and these roundtables are so important to all the participants have an active conversation and an active engagement of what the right to development means, and how we can co-create that knowledge and have a have a same understanding of what the scope of development, what is the scope of the development, and what human rights touches the right to development, and how to make them talk.
Thank you, Sophia. That's really important. You're bringing the idea of the discussion, actually, of the right to development into relatable, understandable, daily issues that regular, like ordinary people are facing with. And so it's very important to have that kind of understanding, so we can effectively and impactfully implement whatever initiatives that we have, especially the Women's Federation for World Peace. We have Dr. Duval here. Welcome, Dr. Duval, and you are joining us from Jamaica. It's so good to see you. Welcome. Can you hear us?
Oh, you're on mute, Dr. Joelle. Can you unmute yourself, please?
Dr. Duval, you're
Unmute. Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we
Can
can
you hear me now?
Mhm.
Yes, I'm in Kingston, Jamaica, at the University of the West Indies. I just came out of a meeting where the University of the West Indies is going to take on this project to launch it globally, the anthology, and they're excited about the inclusion of the right to development in
Wonderful.
the anthology.
Congratulations.
Yeah, so I just came out of the meeting with the administrators at the University of the West Indies here in Kingston, and I do apologize for joining you so late as a result.
Wonderful. It's so good to see you, Dr. Deval.
Good
Look
to
at
see
that.
you
As
too.
always, you are radiating beautifully. And we are so excited. Yeah. Thank you.
So who's in the meeting there? Just yourself? And
Oh, yeah. Well, you can't see us. Well, we have the whole gang. We have
okay.
Sophia online joining us by Zoom, and Shruti joining us from India. And right here with me in the office, we have Rachel and Christine.
Hi,
Yeah.
hi, Rachel and Christine. Hi, good to
Yeah.
see you. Yeah,
Lovely.
so
Thank you.
what
Thank you for
time is
making the time, Dr. Duval.
Yeah. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yes, yes. So, okay,
Yes.
so Ruthie, yeah, back to, I guess I need to answer your question, right? Your question was, how was the right to development in our countries? How do we see it? For me, in the, from the vantage of community development, I want to see the process more on the a micro level, because the right to development is, without looking at this process from a micro level, I don't think one can grasp the enormity of it. And so in community development, there are two ways of looking at it. A process, well, community development is really very much process oriented, and not so much and vision oriented. But the way I do things, and for Women's Federation, we conduct our community development projects, our initiatives. It is actually vision driven. So when I look at the right to development, it looks so big, and it is not as popular words of as the human rights. And so I think what I would like to do is give life to it, from the perspective of community development. So in a way, it's like the whole world is one global community. And then but I'd like to give it a direction more on what is the vision of the right to development. Because as you explained to me, Shruti, the first time I've heard about it, when you, during the workshop, you gave explanation about the whole right to development idea. It is really very much process oriented. It focuses so much on the process of the right of people's participation and the right to contribute, but it's like very much at the moment. And then it's so difficult to see the future of it. But for me, it's so difficult to give a life to visualize the process if I cannot visualize the end of it. So from now on, when I think of the right to development from the vantage of community development, I'd like to look at it with a vision. First, I'd like to understand, what is the vision of the right to development? What does it want to achieve? Like, unlike the MDGs and the SDGs, which, by the way, MDGs, the Millennium Development Goals, and the Sustainable Development Goals, they are the offshoot of the right to development. The right to development is the roots of MDGs and SDGs. SDGs, they have a vision. But that by 2027 there's world peace and development, right? And so centering on this 17 goals. But yeah, during this discussion, I'd like to get a clear idea of what is the vision of the right to development. When all the goals are achieved, what does it look like? the humanity, what kind of enjoyment, what kind of contribution would the world and world leaders would have contributed. So that is still a big mystery to me. And so I don't know about Rachel and Christine, so our rookie UN representatives. Let's hear from them.
Thank you so much, Ms. Murray, and also our UN team. It is my indeed pleasure to be part of this UN representative. And last Right to Development program or event, it was really extremely helpful, all of us. As Shruti mentioned a while ago, what is really the advantage of that topic to all of us? First of all, as a United Nations representative, we have to speak in the language of the UN. We have to be aware on how we use or utilize our words to speak with a lot of people, especially inside the UN. And bearing in mind the purpose and principles of the Charter of the United Nations relating to the achievement of international operation in solving international problems of an economic, social, cultural, or any humanitarian nature, it is helpful and important for us to be informed with the right to development, because it all started with how we can able to communicate with our own selves. Like, what are the process? What is the vision of the right to development? And I believe that we, all representative of the United Nations in all different countries, we have these issues that we have to solve, but we can't even solve that issues if you don't understand what is the meaning of the right to development. So for me, right to development is something about the human rights, whether it's freedom for all without distinction as to race, sex, language, or religion. So that is for me.
Wow. Thank you. That's more understandable, right? Yeah, simple and it's easier to understand. Okay, Christine.
Yes, so first of all, I would like to say hi to everyone listening today. For me, right to development is quite new. So I just learned about it just attending the event at the United Nations, and of course, from Shruti, our very amazing young leader. And yeah, I heard that the right to development is more on the process. So how can we really participate? But attending the session of the United Nations and of course learning from this amazing women, I learned that the right to development is not individualistic. The right to development is about the communities and how the nations can actively participate and contribute. And it is also about empowering people and ensuring that development efforts are inclusive and equitable. So as new in right to development, I really reflected that education plays a vital role, especially in promoting the right to development. And my key takeaway maybe is that we need maybe to adopt a human rights based approach to development to ensure that the principles of non-discrimination and participation and accountability are at the core of all development efforts. So we know that right to development is still a complex issue, but I think through collaborative efforts and of course commitment, so we can work towards a more equitable and maybe an inclusive world. And conversations like this are very important, and I hope that we can do more conversations like this so that in the future the right to development can be something tangible and can be felt, especially on the ground level. So
It's really helpful when you
Yes.
mentioned that the right to development is centered on the group, right? Whereas it's not centered on just the individual, but it's the group of people, community, nations. So I want to ask Shruti, are you still online, Shruti?
Yes, I'm here.
So I want to ask, what is the difference between human rights, which it's that word already is very popular and people understand like women's rights, development, but what is the difference between human rights and the right to development?
So, first of all, thank you everybody for such a wonderful opinion sharing and perspective sharing. I think this is how I think we start. I think this is one of the most important parts of right to development, is to participate. And as Christine beautifully mentioned, how the right to development is visioning development as an inclusive and equitable process. I think that's wonderful as you made it. And also, Marley, answering to two of your questions, actually. It's the first question where you asked, what is the vision of the right to development? And the second question was, what is the difference between human right and the right to development? I think I will answer these two questions together because I think first of all, the right to development itself is a human right. So it's one of the human rights, like other human rights, like the right to life, like the right to identity, like the right to food, like the right to water, like the right to self-determination. Right to development is a human right, just like other human rights. So it is one human right. It's a human right, and it's not an agenda where there necessarily has to be an end product. For example, let's take the example of food. Let's say right to food. So right to food is a human right, as we all know, or let's say women's rights. These are all human rights, right? And these rights will not cease to exist when we reach a goal. Like the right to food will still exist even if every person in the world has good food, because we need to keep protecting it. We need to keep protecting the fact that everybody has food. It's my right. It doesn't, if I have food today, it doesn't mean my right to food ceases to exist from tomorrow, because I need to have food for tomorrow and for tomorrow and for tomorrow as well. My children need to have food. It keeps growing. It's the same way with the right to development. The right to development is a human right which will never cease to exist, or which has an end goal. So it does not have an end goal. It's a process. It's a process which says that you will take the fair share of benefits from any development. So let's take the United States, for example. The United States is keep on growing, and like any other country, or let's take other countries as well. You can have a country in your mind. You can even take your own country in your mind as an example. So there's a growth rate. There's growing development process. There's so many developments happening in this country, but are everybody benefited equitably? Like, let's use the word equitable. So like, are everybody benefited from this development equitably? Or is development an inclusive process? Or who is making the decision for development? How can I contribute to the decisions of development? For example, if my local counseling, let's say local community has a counselor who is elected, but he keeps making decisions which the people don't like the community does not like it. It's not benefiting the community. There's corruption, there's other political reasons in which it's not benefiting the community. So now I have the right, which is given by the right to development, to ask for my equal benefits of development, to ask for my say in development, saying, listen, I don't want this big building here which makes plastics. I don't want this. I want a farm instead here. Like, our community needs a farm with a park for children to play in it. We don't want this plastic producing company here. So please don't put this here just because you say it could bring like more money into our system. We don't want it. We need peace. We don't want pollution. We don't want to harm the environment. In the same way, everything has this say in having the process is your right, and that is called the right to development. So that's a human right, and the right to development will always be growing, and that's why we call it a process. Will never cease to exist. Human rights will never cease to exist because human right needs to be protected, even if you already have it. Even if you have, if we reach gender equality, and if all women have equal rights as other gender, as men, we need to protect it. We need to protect it. It still needs to be protected. We need to protect the equal rights of men and women. We have a vision. So our vision is gender equality, but then the right here is women's right, and that needs to be protected. So that's the same way, right to development. Any vision it might be. Let's say we want to convert these polluted lakes into a beautiful forest and everything. That's the vision. But what is protected here by the right to development is the people's participation in it, is the people, how they benefit out of this forest, or how that will be protected forever. Even if the vision is complete, even if the forest is beautifully made, the vision is achieved, even after the vision achieved, to protect people's benefits out of it, people's development in it, that is what is right to development is going to do. So as a human right, I think we have a lot to take from it, a lot to give to it. We have duties and responsibilities to be part of, out of which governments play a huge role, and also common people do, like equally. So this was something I wanted to ask you all again in return, like understanding that this is a basic human right, just like any other human right. What role do you think governments need to do, or even common people like us, or civil societies like us need to do to protect the right to development, mobilize the right to development? What role do you think these actors play?
Wow, that's thank you, Shruti. It's enlightening. I mean, every time I talk to you, I learn many things. So with your question, I see that as a civil society organization, the education is the key, I think, because the right to development is really not well known. And then identifying policies where we can ask our legislators, our local and national legislators and policymakers at the UN for a specific, level of participation and protection, as you mentioned, and then partnership. So these three words: education, policies, and partnership. So on this light, I would like to ask Dr. Duval. You're still here with us, right, Dr. Duval? I want to
Yes.
ask, because you have a book on the National Sustainable Development Framework of Jamaica. So what does the right of development mean to you, and how do you see its journey in the Jamaica Development Framework?
Okay, I need to preface what I'm saying by sharing with you that since I've been attending these discussions in the UN and learning about the right to development, I had a different notion. I didn't see development as a right. The anthology is entitled Jamaica Land We Love, and the subtitle really carries the message. It says celebrating 60 years of development as an independent nation. So each chapter is an examination and review of the past 60 years of development in every sector of national development, from trade and industry to agriculture to education, every single sector of national development. So it's a massive project, and I was not looking at it as a right. We were just looking at it as development. You know, when we became independent 60 years ago, we were not given a manual or a guidepost as to how do you develop as a nation. And in fact, what does development mean? Because some of the strategies that were passed on from, say, the colonial governments was really a form of disdevelopment or undevelopment. Is there such a word, Sutri? Is there such a
I
word?
think that needs to be the word. That needs to be the word. That needs
Yes.
to be the word.
Or
Yes.
exploitation.
Yes, exploitation. For example, you know, say the Development Bank, the World Bank, you know, they would give us loans for development, but it ended up really strangulating the economy, the country, when we couldn't pay back or the interest rates are so high that it really was not a form of development. You follow what I'm saying?
Mhm.
Hello?
Yes.
That's
Yes.
true.
Yes. Okay. So now I'm wanting to integrate into this, especially the front of the anthology, this right to development as a human right, something that is due to every citizen, and the incumbency upon the leaders to make this right become operational in the conduct of nation building. How is it going to be operational in the lives of communities, people in the communities? What type of participation are we going to open it up for so that it's equitable, diverse, and inclusive of everyone, and not a situation where people are feeling, you know, the powers that be are oppressing us through their so-called strategies of communication and of development. So the issue of peace, the issue of happiness, which is what development should lead to, the intangible outcome of people living lives where they're fulfilled, they can raise their families, and communities can grow, and they will have a sense of well-being. These are the intangible outcomes of development. So I'd like to integrate that chapter in. And Ms. Sutri, if you don't mind, I'd like your participation or co-authorship of this chapter, since you are the expert.
Oh, sure. I am so honored for you to ask me for that. So thank you so much, Dr. Duell. I would love to help you work with that. So for sure, I would be very happy to.
Yes, and it would really set the framework, not just for the present leaders and the people of the nation, but also set the framework for the future generation, because this anthology on development is forward-looking. We're trying to set out principles that we were not given before for the generations to come, the present generation and those to come. But I'm very excited about it, and I'm excited that you're going to participate in it also.
Oh, thank you so much, Dr. Duell. You're such a positive energy, and it's amazing to see all the work that you keep doing, and the great commitment you have. I think this is amazing. I'm sure the right to development will also benefit a lot from all the work that I mean, even every little steps that each of us contribute to, and I think that is wonderful. Thank you so much.
And I want to say that this is it's not just an academic work. We're hoping that other nations, in fact, other nations have lined up and are waiting for this to come out for them to use it as a template for their countries. Countries in the African Union, at least 20 countries out of the African Union want to participate in this. So I think it will be instructive to our own government here in Jamaica. And I don't know if you know that many countries, say in the African diaspora, look to Jamaica for leadership. Did you know that?
Yeah,
Did you know that? Yeah.
Well, I only know it from you, Dr. Duval. You have, remember that conversation we had at the Vienna Cafe? You
Yes.
introduced me about the Jamaica leadership. And
Yes.
so that's how I got to know about Jamaica as the trendsetter and
Yeah.
a nation to look up to in terms of managing and the development of diaspora.
Yes. Amen. Okay,
Yes.
so that's basically my approach, and that this anthology will be enriched with this perspective, especially putting this at the beginning to lay out the concept of development and how going forward we can integrate that into policies and the whole nation building experiment and agenda.
Thank you, Dr. Duval. This is really exciting, and I think it makes such a big difference in terms of people understanding what the right to development is. Yes, and Shruti, before I would like to ask Christine and Rachel, but there's one big question, $1 million question that I want to ask you, Shruti. Why is it that the right to development is underused, underdeveloped, and it's not as widely known as the human rights? And as from what I understood, it's been declared since almost 40 years, 1986. So what was the challenges of the right to development?
Yes, thank you, Marley, for that question. I think it's one of the most important questions and one of the most biggest problem as well. Is the problem is that the right to development was born out of the movement of freedom. So I think the right to development was established where after the during the period of decolonization. So when countries started having the freedom, and as Dr. Duval mentioned, the freedom was achieved, but it was not a complete freedom for development, because there was a system of exploitation for so many years, for nearly 200, 300 years, 400, 500, 600 years. Name the colonial movement and name the colonial period, there was an exploitative system of human rights, of trade and trade policies. So our raw materials from developing countries or human resources from developing countries were exploited for the benefit of the colonizers. And this was the trade system set during that colonial period. And when decolonization happened, it was only the transfer of power, but it was not the transfer of the system itself. We were still in the exploitative trade mechanism. And even till today, we have different forms of neo-colonial exploitations. So what happened is this right to development was a voice for the developing countries to say that development is our human right. And development must be free and meaningful and actively led by us. So we need to have equitable development. We need to have our own free development. So this was the problem, because it led to political polarization between the countries in the north, the developed countries, and the developing countries. So it became a political part. It was more like, oh my God, now the countries who are used to this exploitative trade policies, which benefited them, such as in the north, now it is difficult for them to give up the benefits that they have been taking out of this exploitation for so many years. So now what happens is they don't want to end up in a discussion calling it a human right. Like, they're like, oh no, this is how the trade has been and that's how it's going to be. And we're not talking about human rights here. And that is why the right to development is becoming a challenge to be protected, because the countries in the north and even sometimes countries in the south make it a matter of political debate. They make it a matter of politics when it's not. It's not a political debate to debate. It's not a negotiation. It is a human right, right? It's a human right which is not put to a debate saying, oh, should it be protected or should it be not? This is how much I'm going to commit myself to protect it. And this is and in this part, I'm not going to commit myself. I'm going to abstain from this. This is not up to debate. You're not supposed to have these debates and discussions here. So what you're going to do here is that you are just going to protect it as a human right, right? But that has been very difficult because it has been politicized. And now here, as civil society, we have a big role to play, to stress, to emphasize to the member states, to emphasize to the political community that the right to development is a human right. And we don't want you to violate the right to development by making it a political topic. It's not a political topic, although it should be protected by political interest. It's not protected. So what we need to try, it's become a matter of negotiation. And even at the UN, if you listen to the debates at the UN, you're going to see all the countries from the South saying that right to development must be promoted, must be protected and everything. When you will have countries like the UK or the European Union, for example, who are going to say, we're sorry, we did a lot, but we're not going to commit ourselves to anything more. All this more commitment is unnecessary. This is the terminologies that they're going to use because it's like, because they feel like it's a political competition. We need to establish to all the member states, be it from the developing countries or the developed countries, that please stop fighting. This is not a fight between who's going to benefit out of it. It should be the people who should benefit out of it. So it's not up to your political competition. We're not here to compete politically, but we are here to see the benefit for the people. So, that's why we need to be there. There's not a lot of civil society in these debates. And that's a big problem. That's a big challenge, Merle, as you were asking, that there's not the voice of the people. The voice of the people is missing in the right to development. And as you were saying before, educating about this right is very, very important. When you were pointing out how important it is to mobilize and educate the existence of the right to development and how everybody has the right to claim this right, that is very, very important. And I think the challenges are there. It's a very political part, but we need to overcome it. Just like how women 100 years ago overcame the debates that women's rights was a question. It was a question. Women's rights was a question. It was like, oh, do women have rights? Like that was a question like 100 years ago. Like women had to like fight for their vote, the right to vote, right? And like they had to fight for it. But now we're not anymore fighting for the question that if women have the right to vote. We have established that it's a right. It's a right. It's a human right. And that's the fight we need to do for the right to development right now. So
Can I make
we
a
need
comment following up on that?
Yes, Dr. Deval.
Just as an addendum to what you're saying, the powers that be in the North or wherever, the whole issue of human rights, they do not want it to become even a political debate. And they do not want mobilization of the masses, of the people, because it's protecting the power structure. It's about power and protecting the powers that be and the structures that are there. As you said, women had to fight, they had to mobilize, they had to form movements and advocacy groups. And I think that that's what we need to do. Maybe we will be at the forefront of that, fighting for the rights to development. Maybe we can start an advocacy group to educate people, mobilize people, create a movement where there's a groundswell. Because right now, nobody cares about it. You know, we in the UN and the Women's Federation for World Peace, we're talking about it. No, what we need, a global movement, like the climate movement, all these movements, we need a global movement. And so maybe—
Let's go, Dr. Deval, let's go.
Yes, we can be in the forefront. You see, like with the climate movement, we had this young girl from, I think it was Sweden.
Yes.
That young miss, she was a teenager. And she ignited a movement about climate change. And so we can be those in the vanguard of that movement to educate the world. It can just start with a spark within our group here. And we help to create a movement. It has to be revolutionary because the powers that be do not want any change. They want to maintain the status quo. And if they educate us and mobilize, you know, regular, ordinary people to say, hey, I have a right to development of food and you know, protecting all my rights as a human being, you know. So if we extend the import of human rights to include the right to development, and then we stress that, you see, at the national level and the international level, the powers that be, they will have to bow. And that's when we have
Dr. Deval, that is, that for civil society, that sounds very exciting. But if anything, if we have to go in that direction, I feel very much that we need to do it with, as I say, vision-oriented, vision-driven approach and strategies, because we don't want to repeat the journeys of the women's movement and the climate movement. That is, in the beginning, it's exciting, revolutionary, exciting, but then it becomes contentious, and then so it becomes a stumbling block. But what I think is needed in order to move forward is the spirit of interdependence, mutual prosperity, sharing of universal values. So I feel like in these narratives of the right to development, what is needed is to look at a universal, what is the common ground that the humanity, countries and races and groups can work together, a common base. And yeah, I think that's what's important in order to move forward. These two girls, and we're running out of time actually, but I just want to mention that during the the 7th session of the expert mechanism on the right to development last month at the UN, what really inspired me is the 5 thematic issues, the dialogues, the new agenda for peace, and then the moving beyond GDP, reform of international financial architecture, rights of future generation, and youth participation. And to me, it sets the direction. And it sets the direction, although it doesn't necessarily give us like a clear visuals of where and what it's going to be like, but it's good enough for me to kind of make a commitment that Women's Federation is going to work to contribute to the promotion and the achievement of the right to development. So, Shruti, should we, for our concluding statement, should we ask these two ladies here?
Yes, please.
Well, for me, I cannot speak in behalf of the government or any other
The youth, speak on
organization.
behalf of the young people
Like
or the future generation.
and of course, being a member of Women's Federation, an NGO, a civil society that is pro people, we act in behalf of the people. So I would like to participate in maybe in a grassroots mobilization, because civil society, we are the mobilizers of the communities, and we need to facilitate participatory processes, and we need to empower the marginalized groups. And for us, we need to bring their voices. We need to amplify their voices. We need to amplify the voices of the vulnerable people and ensure that their needs are maybe considered in the development initiatives. And I want a lot of young people to also learn more about the right to development, since I am still learning about it.
We are all learning about
Yes.
it. We are actually learning. Yes, yes.
Discover more and participate more in the future. Yeah, that's for me.
And Rachel.
Yes, thank you so much, Christine. And for me, the role of the government and the civil society that really clears me right after I attended the right to development. And considering that the elimination of the massive and also the frequent violations of the human rights of the peoples and individuals affected by the situation, such as those resulting from, like what Shruti said, neocolonialism, it is also help us to aware when it comes to racism, racial discrimination, foreign domination, especially for workforce requirements, occupations, aggression. So for me, the role of the government is to assess and reevaluate the process. The job of the civil society, especially for the youth, we are the representative of the youth, is to speak and to be the icon of diplomatic, for them to be able to know and understand what is the right to development. And that's why we are here, we are on live, because we wanted to promote what is really the goal of the United Nations. And we, as a representative for the United Nations, we are civil society speaking on behalf of those men. Thank you.
How eloquent. Listen to these young ladies. So, right, Shruti?
That's amazing.
I am really delighted to be surrounded with these brilliant young women. I mean, yeah, for sure. If we continue with this conversation and we influence the minds of people, and coupled with the grassroots mobilization of the civil society, and we have started really, Shruti, in Philippines with the Commission on Higher Education of the Philippines. I have started promoting the right to development. And I think, once this is understood very well, then initiatives and policies, partnerships can follow. We have actually Dr. Alapo with us. I read her comment. Dr. Alapo, are you still with us? Christine, would you like to read?
Sure. So,
Yes.
Dr. Remy, actually, she has a lot of comments here. So, Dr. Remy said that yes, political independence, but not economic independence. So most of the former colonized countries are heavily dependent on their former colonial administrators. So take, for example, the African countries.
Mm-hmm.
So their currency is officially tied to the French government, and every year there's a percentage that they have to deposit.
Oh, that's
So,
interesting.
yes.
That's yes.
So this keeps the French economy strong, but not the Africans. So
Interesting. Okay.
so they need permission from the French, and they tell them how much and what to do with it.
Mm.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Remy. And any more comments?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Dr. Alapo is in class.
Okay, hi, Dr. Alapo. Well, yes, so for today's debut, roundtable talk, or this episode, Right to Development, is really fit for the purpose and the vision of this roundtable talk. And we want to keep doing this every month, third week of the month. And so, yeah, we open this up with the right to development, and next month we will decide what is the topic going to be. It's probably on the high level political forum, or if anything, we'll decide. But first of all, Shruti, thank you for being our expert today. And such a delightful and inspiring, informational conversation. And I'm sure that whoever is listening to us, it really has inspired them too. And Dr. Deval in Jamaica, bring our heart to Jamaica. It's warm and the sunshine of Jamaica.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you for joining us. And Sophia, you're still in New York City. You are flying to Mexico tomorrow.
Yes.
Yes. So we'll see each other maybe in a couple of months, hopefully. And then Dr. Alapo, you are in class, but your heart and your mind is with us. Those very important comments, I think, is informational. And these two ladies, Christine and Rachel, thank you for joining me here. And yeah, I look forward for our next month's conversation.